All right, and I was just looking back over our old stuff and reading it, and boy, am I brilliant. I mean,
And good evening, everybody. David, we're on the air.
Oh, okay.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD, our September podcast, a.k.a. our pre-preseason show. This is our final off-season podcast. We are less than a month away from the start of our real preseason podcasts. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. Very quickly, we've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to introduce our whole panel. We've got David Griggs, of course, the NCAA puppetologist. Also, John Stalika, John Teitel, and Matt Sikowski all back with us. Gentlemen and Puppet, how are you tonight?
Good, and we're off to a typical Hoops HD start. I think Chad's screen is frozen. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Am I frozen? Well, what I'm actually going to do is, and David, we want to start right here, and I wanted to put this right up on my screen because I know there's a topic you wanted to cover that the rest of us all covered at the end of last season. But David, this is the first time you realized it. If you can see it on my screen here.
Yeah, one of the things we did last year, there it is up on the screen, was, and we're going to get into everything that exists on the site. We're kind of ready to roll. We're a 6 month on, 6 months off operation. It's sort of October, but we did the annual bracketology last year, and nobody else on the panel but me realized that our very own John Stalika finished third in the nation. John Teitel finished third in the nation.
I may have finished in the bottom three, David.
Yeah. And can you so we do two different types of bracketology. God, we're off to a crappy start. This is wonderful. We do two different types of bracketology. One is the way we've always done it. We do it by committee. We don't really try and guess anything with any sort of accuracy. We just replicate the process and put together the tournament the way we think it should be. And then John Stalika is our selection committee. John Teitel. Should we just? No, we shouldn't start. John Teitel is our selection committee guessing expert. He and I collaborate. The way it works is he picks all the teams and he seeds them, and then I post them. Well, he posts them, but like I sometimes post a link to them. So it's a collaboration between the two of us, and the two of us finished third. How about that?
Congratulations. John T., let me turn to you. Yeah, I think we did congratulate you earlier. David just drank too much. They forgot about it. But again, congratulations on third place in last year's bracket matrix.
Thanks. If you'd like to celebrate things 6 months after they happen, you can celebrate me doing my taxes next month.
Oh, jeez. Okay. But David, actually, John T. also helped with our collaborative bracket. And let's kind of scroll down here,
yes,
and down here, and down here, and down here. And there we go, 72nd Hoops HD panel. So congratulations to the rest of us. Matt, you're part of our panel. Congratulations to you, too, for 72nd place.
72-3.
Wow. We at least beat a few people.
Yeah, there's a few others below us. Not many, but
if you finished below us when we weren't even trying to be accurate, you really need to just shut down the shop.
Now, we are better than a man with a spreadsheet. We are better than dudes on sports.
Hey, we beat Badger Nation. I think that's all that really counts.
Badger Nation, didn't they put Wisconsin in every single seed spot? What we also want to do today, because it's our pre-preseason show, before we get into some news and notes, is let's see if this will come up on the screen. There it is. This is our Hoops HD website that you can go to at any time. We just wanted to give everybody a bit of a reintroduction to our website. You'll always see as the opening article our most recent post, which right now from what we see on the screen is John T., your interview with Wes Flanagan today, actually, another one of your great interviews. And you've had a lot of them being posted. Anything you can give us, any previews or anything else that's coming up soon?
I mean, I like to play it a little close to the vest, but
Okay.
You might see a couple of St. Joe's players for you Philly fans, and you might see a coach of a little school from Chattanooga, and hopefully a lot of good things to come in the months and weeks ahead.
Oh, well, that's real exciting. So keep an eye out for that. That's part of our preseason content.
You might see an interview with a puppet too.
No,
I don't want to put any spoilers out there, but I mean, the only problem is how much awesome can you pack into one interview?
Yeah, but what you'll also see here, though, there's a lot of tabs up here, and each one of them is being updated. You can take a look at any of them. The About Us tab will tell you a little bit about our panel here. The All Conference Awards, again, John T. creates All Conference Awards. I believe this is still the awards at the end of last season. Under the bracketology tab, you'll see our most recent brackets. The Centenary Award. John Sleeky, you want to tell us what the Centenary Award tab is about?
The Centenary Award tab is something that's come up over the past 5 or 6 years where we celebrate not just the worst team in all of Division I, but one of the prizes of winning the Centenary Award is you get to remain under consideration on the Hoops HD selection committee throughout the bitter end of the process.
How we finished 72nd is a complete and total mystery.
Yes, part of it being that we had Chicago State on our board last year. They did not get voted into our field, yet we still finished 72nd. A few other things here, and this is a real important one, the College Hoops Countdown. You go here, and the clock should show up on your screen, and we are 50 days and 17 hours and 42 minutes as we record this Wednesday, September 21st, away from the start of the season. Had a little minor adjustment there because we may not be having a noon tip-off on November 11th. Looks like it's going to be at 3 p.m. to actually start the season as Eastern Michigan is going to be on the road. They normally host a noon game on noon on that first day. They're at Pittsburgh as part of the Legends Classic that day, though. So Eastern Washington has a home game at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. We've got tabs here for conference tournaments, in-season tournaments. These are all of the in-season, mostly exempt tournaments, anything that's in a bracketed formats here. That tab is already up and running for this season. You can see right there the Puerto Rico tip-off. We're going to have a podcast early in the season going over that. Joby's not with us, but he's got his nitty-gritty rankings. And David, I think you're the only one other than him that understands the nitty-gritty rankings, so I'll throw that one over to you.
Well, I understand them a little bit. He takes the top 25 in the RPI and various other computer polls and comes up with basically a ranking system for that's supposed to sort of approximate what the committee does. And it's pretty on point. I don't know. We need to enter that one in the bracket challenge next year.
We probably would do better with that.
Yeah. So we have the expert Titel, who is better than everyone except 2 in the country. You have us, that's only better than about 10 people, and then Joby probably finishes somewhere in the middle.
John T is so awesome. He's just been cloned here.
Yeah, we somehow have John T twice here. John, congratulations and welcome back.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know which John T to throw the next question to, so maybe we'll go somewhere else. But just a few other tabs are up there. There's a video streaming guide, list of the current selection committee, our NCAA tournament survival board, which is our list of all teams that are currently eligible to win the NCAA tournament. Matt, we have 344 teams left. Anybody that you think can come off yet, or are we still 344?
Boston College.
I would say DePaul's could maybe be taken off.
DePaul's already fallen off the board. And also a link, probably the most important one here, to our season preview. So if you missed any of John T's great interviews, you can catch a full list of them right here on the season previews tab. I'll be posting my conference previews also beginning October 3rd. There'll be links to them there. So a lot coming up real soon. When we get to the end of October, you'll see our video podcast previewing each conference. We've got a lot coming up next month. David, anything else you want to discuss about the site? I know you wanted to make sure we hit everything.
The message board.
Oh yeah, the message board.
Okay.
If you need a nice, quiet place to go and relax, where no one will ever bother you, check out our message board.
If anybody does want to post the forums, we do read them. We will respond, but they weren't that very busy last year for some reason.
Or the year before that.
Let me see if I can turn this screen share off here. Okay. I think I'm back. But we want to get into some news and notes here. And John T., let me start with you because you are right in the D.C. area there, and there's been a little bit of news out of D.C., fair significance to our defending NIT champions, as Mike Lonergan was dismissed very recently as the head coach of George Washington following these allegations of verbal abuse. Do you have any news for us on this, of how this came about and where this is all going for this team this year?
So it's definitely made the news all over in DC, and for a couple of reasons. One, we've seen coaches behaving badly in the past. So to see that he didn't just get a slap on the wrist, but an escort out of the building and out of his job is, I guess, reassuring to people who think that the safety and security of student athletes is important and all that good stuff. Secondly, to have it happen in September, like on the brink of the start of the season, the timing I don't think could be any worse for GW. Obviously, like they bring back some talent from an NIT title-winning team. I don't know if they're going to promote an assistant or get an interim or find a new guy. I hear Larry Brown might be free this month. Who knows?
Oh my God!
But yeah, it's getting a lot of coverage, and I have no idea what the ultimate verdict's going to be and all the allegations, but it's starting to look a little juicy.
John, not to hijack Chad here, they have yet to name an interim head coach, as far as I know. Do you expect that it would be Hodge Turner, who was the associate head coach?
Sure. I mean, I have not followed the GW assistant coaching staff very closely, but I assume that this late in the game that you kind of got to take what you can get. So I think that that's a good bet.
Okay.
Well, John, let me stick with you here with another question, though. I mean, looking at the GW team, what they were bringing back, especially led by Tyler Kavanaugh, cutting into this season, I know we're getting into a little bit into almost a preseason preview here. I would have thought that they could have potentially contended towards the top of the Atlantic 10. I don't know with Dayton and Rhode Island, but with this whole mess, do you think it's going to lead to an on-court effect, and that this team that maybe could have finished in the top 3 or 4 in the conference may be 8th, 9th, or 10th in the league now because of this?
I definitely think it will. Obviously, call me in 6 months. We'll find out for sure. But, I mean, say what you will about Lonergan. Like, he won an NIT title. 15 years ago, he won a national title at Catholic and was National Coach of the Year, albeit at the D3 level. Kavanaugh is a great senior power forward. I think he is a strong contender for 8-10 first team. Yuta Watanabe is still there. He made 4 threes in the 2015 NIT, and he had 4 blocks in the 2016 NIT title game win over Valpo. So they have some talent. They lost a ton of seniors, though, and the schedule is manageable. They have Kansas, they have Temple, Miami. Like, it's not a cupcake, but yeah, I don't think they're going to contend at the 8-10. I think that the combination of losing the seniors, not easy schedule, and losing their coach in September is just going to be too much to handle.
It's not just the seniors, but there's also been an outflow of transfers that have been a major red flag the past couple of years for GW. Because I think Butler, as one example, is going to have Keithan Savage, who actually sat out a year and is going to have 1 year of eligibility for Butler. So we'll have to see how that goes on both fronts.
Yeah, I would say out of all their outflows of travels, he's the only one that caught my attention of you wanted to keep him, you did not want to lose him. The rest of these guys, there was a high number, but sort of I looked at it a little bit as like the churn of the bottom of your roster.
Well, it's good to know that he's only abusing the bottom of the roster.
Okay. Matt, let me stick with you a second on another topic because we get to the abuse of the bottom of the roster. I don't think we need to go much further on that. But the other big piece of news that came from the NCAA, which followed the suit of the NBA with the All-Star Game and some major concerts, and has decided to pull the first and second round games out of Greensboro for this year because of HB2 in North Carolina. We will know by October 7th where the first and second round games that are being pulled out of Greensboro will be played. But and I don't believe that you were with us, Matt, when we discussed this law earlier in the offseason. So I want to get kind of your thoughts on this, and do you think this was the right move by the NCAA?
I think in the NCAA's case, absolutely, is like a big institution that doesn't do a whole lot right. This was one of the few things I think they did do right, and that's just a discriminatory law against all citizens. And I mean, yes, the bathroom law is a big part, but there are other elements of the bill that were just as discriminatory, just I think as disgusting in my opinion, that I'm glad the NCAA took a stand, moved out. And this isn't like the individual member colleges where, with David's point there, that, hey, if Duke and Albany was Albany not going down to Duke, and that or in this case, the NCAA organization, get it out of the state, move it. I like Matt Norlander's idea of the Palestra, but anywhere else, I'm fine. I think, yeah.
I'll see your Matt Norlander and raise you a Gary Parrish, because he's also pointed out that the NCAA has taken NCAA tournament games out of South Carolina in the past because of their Confederate flag or Confederate naval flag, as the puppet has pointed out before. I mean, it would send quite the message to not just take games out of North Carolina, but also reward someone like South Carolina, who's finally starting to get into the 21st century. But let me also add another point. It's not just the NCAA that's taking games out of Greensboro. The ACC is also moving all of their neutral site tournaments out of North Carolina, including the football championship game out of Charlotte.
And the SoCon is looking at doing it as well, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't know if they went through with it.
They haven't announced it yet, but the SoCon has their basketball tournament is every year is in Asheville. They are discussing potentially moving that this year as well. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I not to echo what's already been said, but I have far less of a problem with this because the one thing that bothered me about the Albany situation is that I think you were hitting the wrong people. Like, don't punch Albany or Duke when they had nothing to do with the law. The NCAA and the ACC, no one really gets hurt. Like, none of the actual college teams get hurt, and they send a message. So I have no problem with them pulling it out. I think it was – I can support that decision.
Albany would not get punched, David. They would just get tripped.
Whatever.
Okay, we've got the Grayson Allen jokes going on already here.
Yeah.
But John T., do you have a prediction where these games are going to end up? Could it be South Carolina, Virginia? I think the preference is to keep them on the East Coast somewhere, from what I've heard.
I'm sure that's the preference. I mean, my heart says the Palestra, but I mean, and I want to believe it, but there's just no way. The NCAA likes to make money as much as this is a nice, kind-hearted effort by them. As Matt said, I mean, the Palestra only holds like 8,000 and change, so there's just no way they're going to put it in a stadium that small when they could do a bigger stadium and sell twice as many tickets.
Well, they could put it in Clemson Stadium in Greenville, South Carolina, but
they could. I mean, it's how big is it?
Well, actually, will Little John be reopened this year? I believe it will.
Yeah.
Okay. But a couple other topics. John Stalika, let me turn over to you here. The Big 12, given that you are in Cincinnati, Big 12 expansion is in big news as it's been for a while now. It's going to happen, and I know you're a Xavier alum, but Cincinnati is on the very short list of teams that are left that should be that look like they're going to be getting in there. Do you have any updates for us?
I don't have any new updates other than what's already been covered, although it seems like Cincinnati and Houston seem to be the favorites. But part of me wonders if Cincinnati and Houston finally do get invites to the Big 12, do Texas and Oklahoma just go ahead and decide to take their ball and leave?
After the TV deal's up.
Well, Matt, do you think that Texas and Oklahoma would turn around and leave if the Big 12 expands with the teams they don't want in?
I think Houston would kind of placate Texas for now. I'll say within the next decade, Texas is gone. I think they finally go to the Big Ten and find their home there. But for now, they'll stick around. I think adding Houston there would placate them because for whatever reason, they seem to be supporting that. I think it's a little bit of conflict of their interest, but.
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's just as much political, Matt. What it is that the Texas Board of Regents, who just hired the president within a year ago, would certainly want Houston in. They oversee all the colleges there. And from a financial standpoint, expanding the Big 12 makes sense because for whatever reason, the more schools there are, the more money each school gets. So in other words, like, the money they get per school goes up if the number of teams go up. There's a lot of logistics to that. But that's essentially how it would work. And the suspicion is Texas, Oklahoma want to expand out to 12 or 14 so they can get more money. And then once the TV deal's up in 2025, they're going to bolt, as you said. But as far as why Texas is pushing for Houston, it's more or less the Board of Regents than it is the Texas Athletic Department that's pushing for it.
Well, John T., if we're talking 14 and we're saying Cincinnati and Houston is two of them, do you have any word on who the other two could possibly be?
I really thought, had you asked me a month ago, that BYU was high on the list, but now it seems like a lot of the chatter on the internet is that it's not going to be them. So, I mean, I think it's up in the air. I do think that Cincinnati and Houston are strong favorites. Maybe Memphis, UConn, I don't know. They just seem so far away and so entrenched on the East Coast that
Memphis is out. Like they've said that they've cut Memphis.
They have cut Memphis. I'm still a couple teams I'm still hearing in there are the likes of a Colorado State or a Central Florida or a South Florida, and obviously that's just for the geographic foothold in those areas.
Well,
and
I got to say
anything
I'm
else.
highly we're going to get to this later. We're going to close the show with this, but I am highly disappointed that Missouri is no longer in the mix.
I mean, if they wanted to upgrade their football, they could just get North Dakota State to replace Kansas right now.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Stalika, because honestly, I think North Dakota State would give the Big 12 as good of a product as any of these other teams that they've been discussing. A high-level basketball team and a football team that's at least better than Kansas and maybe better than a few of the other teams in that conference. I would be all on board seriously for North Dakota State being in the Big 12, but I don't even think they're on the list as far as I've heard.
They would need a much bigger stadium. But
we're talking North Dakota. The entire state could chip in. We could build a bigger stadium. That's no problem.
And you'd probably have South
Carson
Dakota
Wentz
State tagging along.
But Stalika, let me stick to one other point you wanted to raise here. I know that you wanted to bring up some news about Pat Skerry over in Towson.
Yeah, this is going to be relating to Election Day, where he's actually going to be requiring his players to vote in the general election, whether they vote locally or whether they vote by absentee ballots. And this has come with the blessing of his athletic director at Towson.
Well, do you agree with that, John T? Do you think that is something that a head coach of a basketball team should be telling his players? You have to vote?
I'm actually 100% against this, and I understand about civic duties and the importance of an election and the fact that it shouldn't take too much time out of their busy days as student athletes, et cetera, et cetera. However, while I respect everyone's right to vote, I really don't think that it is a duty to vote, and I understand that it's important to get young people involved in the political process, and I'm all for Coach Skerry encouraging his players even strenuously to vote. Making it a requirement, I am totally against it.
And I personally have to agree with you there. I think as much as having a right to vote, you have a right not to vote. And you could take a look at these candidates and say, I do not want to cast a vote for any of them. I don't have a third party I want to vote for. I don't want to do a write-in. I just don't want to vote on any of these issues here. And I want to exercise that right. And I think that is as much of a person's constitutional right as the right to actually go out there and vote.
I agree. I mean, I don't think a right is an obligation. I think people should vote. I'm disappointed when people don't, but you don't have to. You don't have to.
Well, I guess on that note, there's one other major topic we wanted to hit this week. And David, if we can pull this up on your screen here, actually, this list. Yes, David, myself, and our colleague Galen had a chance at the end of last season to have a chat with our good friend Joe Lenardi over at ESPN. And actually, those of you that are watching this podcast on our website right now, if you look right below us, we're also going to have a relink posted to that video of our conversation with Joe. And during that podcast, David and Joe created a series of basketball games. David, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, what this is the annual Griggs Lenardi Awesomeness Series. It's a series of out-of-conference games that will be played throughout the year. The way it works is that these teams should play, and Joe Lenardi endorses this event, and he and I are going to mandate that they play. We've been hard at work, the two of us, all summer, trying to make this work. Actually, I haven't talked to him since the podcast, but but anyway, there you go.
Well, that's about as hard as you ever worked, David, so that's okay.
Right, yeah. But there it is, and we're just going to run through these, again, revisit the Awesomeness Series and a lot of these games that we'd like to see and hope to see this year or next year. And this has Joe Lenardi's full endorsement. You know, he wasn't as accurate as our own John Teitel, but I'm pretty sure Teitel endorses these games too. But he is, a figure that you would want you'd rather have his endorsement than not, and he endorses all these games.
Well, let's run through these. Let's cover them for the bottom up here. That might be the easiest way to go. The very last game there is Virginia and VCU. John Stalika, unfortunately we don't have Joby with us tonight to comment on that, but that's a series that hasn't happened, which is kind of funny because Tony Bennett has been pretty good about scheduling in-state rivals.
Yeah. Well,
actually, I could have sworn Virginia and VCU have played in recent years, at least in a home-and-home, because I think what David is alluding to is it should become a staple on both schedules, but I do respect that Virginia is at least trying to rotate different teams from the Commonwealth of Virginia into their schedule. And they've also shown they're not afraid to go up to places like Wisconsin, Green Bay. And even though they lost that game, it didn't seem to hurt them that much because they wound up getting a #1 seed that year.
And we seem to have lost David, so I guess he's must be on the phone right now with Lenardi. So while we try to get him back, John T, another game here on this list was Arizona and New Mexico, and I know you're an Arizona alum. Can you tell us why those two teams don't play anymore? Because this was a annual rivalry for quite a while.
Quite a while, and I think actually since this millennium, like about 15, 16 years ago, was the last time they met. It used to be a great matchup just because it was these two teams from the Wild Wild West and kind of a border war and great players who ended up, a lot of them alums from both teams made it to the NBA. Frankly, I think they just got lost in the shuffle. If it was still the Pac-8 or Pac-10, I think there'd be enough non-conference games to go around to squeeze in the Lobos. But the fact that there's 11 other teams I want to see us face with a conference title on the line and now a conference championship, which there wasn't back in the 90s. There was no Pac-8 or Pac-10 championship to the best of my knowledge. To be honest, I'd rather see us play like other Western powers, like a Gonzaga or UNLV. Not that New Mexico is a terrible team, like they're solid, but I don't lose sleep about not playing New Mexico.
Well, there's always UTEP.
Well, what about the credit you get for going to New Mexico?
Are we still going?
Yeah, welcome back, David.
I'm glad to know that we're still going.
But what about the credit you get for playing at the Pit and at New Mexico?
It's a hell of a venue, and like that definitely gives them. I think back in the day, I don't know how it is now, but it was one of the biggest home court advantages. Like it was very tough to win there.
Right. Matt, now while we try to get David situated back in here, another game on this list actually happened last year in the NCAA tournament, Notre Dame and Michigan. But that's not an annual event, even though it had been one of the great football rivalries for years.
Yeah, I would actually, since this is Hoops HD, I would say that should be marked under Notre Dame, which great rivalry. They were at one point together in the Big East, but played for many years as independents. And then even when Notre Dame went to the Big East, they, for the most part, played every year. And has gone on hold now. There's been hints that it might come back, but as of now, there's nothing set in stone for that. But that'd be, I think, for at least for hoops, much better. And then, yeah, Notre Dame, Michigan, keep that for football.
Well, David, there we go. We got to make a change on your list here and remove Notre Dame, Michigan, and replace it with Notre Dame, Marquette. But David, if you are back, actually, let me stick with Stalika next here because the next game is right in his backyard. Xavier versus Dayton. Why don't these two teams play?
Oh, I thought you were going to mention Xavier and Mother Miami.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Those two do play, don't they? Yeah.
I mean, both Xavier and Dayton, they have like the longest rivalry with each other, and it was fairly intense at times, although, let's be honest, when you go back to, I think, 1979 or 1980, Dayton actually led the series by as many as 40 games. It shrunk down to about 20 games after the end of the Skip Prosser regime, and Xavier has cut even further into that deficit since Thad Matta and Sean Miller. So maybe on Xavier's side, there's probably the feeling that it just hasn't been as competitive as Dayton fans would like you to believe. But I don't think either team has really suffered that much ever since they've gone their separate ways. Yeah. I mean, personally, I'd like to see the game come back in some capacity.
Well, yeah, David. I thought when we spoke to Lenardi, he was really interested in this game. Of all the games, I think that we discussed with him.
Yeah, which was kind of surprising. I know you're going bottom up, Chad, but I mean the last 3 or 4 on there. Out of the 16 games on this list, I think 12 or 13 of them are genuine dislike. The two sides don't like each other. They just wanted to get away from each other, and this is sort of a 10-year-old picking on his 7-year-old, like both sides acting really childish. So this game, you know, if you look at some of the other ones, it's not West Virginia Pitt, it's not BYU Utah, it's certainly not Kansas Missouri. It just doesn't have that level of venom. So it was odd that this is the one that stuck out stuck out with him the most. But if you stop and think about it, this would be an out-of-conference rivalry between two tournament caliber teams, neither of which are FBS programs. And there aren't any of those that I can think of outside of maybe Joe's Villanova I mean, is Joe's even a regular tournament team? I mean, I know that that's a big rivalry, and there doesn't really seem to be any sort of major fallout. Every indication was that they were going to keep playing, and the only thing that you can really look at as to why they don't is because the coaches don't want to play each other. If you look at that sort of circle of friends, Thad Matta, Sean Miller, Archie Miller, Chris Mack. Chris Mack was Sean Miller's assistant, and from what I understand, he and Archie are really close, and as much as the fans want it, they just don't play. Xavier and Dayton seem to get along. They play in some other sports. There's no reason why they shouldn't play in basketball.
Well, if we don't have your list anymore, but on your list we saw Gonzaga versus Washington. David, they've agreed to a 4-year home and home.
Yes.
Cross it off.
What's that?
Cross it off.
Oh, okay.
Also, I thought BYU and Utah are taking a 1-year hiatus or something, but then they're starting again.
Well, yeah, Gonzaga and Washington, this is a game that Joe and I got back. I'm happy to announce that it's back.
You did it.
Yes, we got this back. It's one of the things we've been working on. But interesting, these two used to regularly play. In the latter part of the series, Gonzaga dominated it, and it was really just very, very bad blood between Lorenzo Romar and Mark Few. And I think some of you guys chime in because it's a little foggy, but I think it all started with the recruit of Josh Heitfeld, didn't it? Gonzaga thought that they were cheating. They turned Washington in, and it became a big blow up. And the two coaches genuinely dislike each other. I mean, but Washington sent out a few olive branches to Gonzaga, as I understand, to try and get the series resumed. There was talk of playing a neutral split venue at Key Arena. Gonzaga wouldn't do it, but it's resumed. It's starting at Gonzaga, and it's a 4-year deal. Joe Lenardi and I got that back.
Well, good job, David. Matt, we mentioned Houston possibly into the Big 12 a few minutes ago. Why don't Texas and Houston play during the regular season, especially if, as David says, Texas wants Houston in the conference?
I would just think, for the most part, Houston hasn't really been any good. I mean, they're emerging a little bit here under Calvin Sampson, and it might be a good game now. But for the most part, I don't think a whole lot to add for Texas. It's not quite like Marquette not playing UWM, but probably not much above that.
Well, John T., let me turn back to your backyard here. Georgetown and George Washington, putting aside all the Mike Lonergan stuff for now, why aren't these two teams playing each other every year?
No good reason. I mean, Georgetown and Maryland comes to mind, too. That finally happened last year after like a 30-year hiatus. So I don't know if the coaches dislike each other. It makes all the sense in the world from a geographic standpoint. From a competitive standpoint, I'm all for it.
Don't they play in everything but men's basketball? Am I right on that?
That's not something I know the answer to. Does anybody have any knowledge of women's lacrosse here? No. Okay.
No, Joby's not here tonight.
Joby would actually know that answer, I believe. But,
yeah,
Stalika, you being a Big East guy, let me bring up two Big East teams here, Syracuse and UConn.
Oh, I thought you were going to bring up Syracuse and Georgetown, which I think they do have the return game going up to Syracuse this year. But I think, well, let's see, Syracuse and UConn. I'm not sure if they have any.
They're playing this year at MSG, I thought.
They are. David, why are they on your list?
Because, well, it's not a regular series, but we did get it arranged for this year at MSG, so we got it back. These two, I don't think, have bad blood either. I think they both realize that there's value in it for both of them. And to Syracuse's credit, they've continued to play Big East rivals. They've played Villanova. They've played St. John's. They've got a long, is it a 10-year deal with Georgetown that will probably be renewed. So I'm glad that they see the value in keeping some of these old Big East rivalries alive. And I don't think that UConn and Syracuse will duck each other. They might not play every year, but I think they'll play more often than not.
Okay. Well, Stalika, let me throw another one at you then. The Texas and Texas A&M, the two teams have played once since A&M left the Big 12, and that was in the Bahamas in the Battle for Atlantis last year in a game that got scheduled for them. They didn't actually schedule it. So should these two teams be playing, in your opinion?
It would certainly help to have this rivalry at least reinstated on the basketball court, given that Texas A&M has gotten quite a bit better in recent years, including a very lucky Sweet 16 bid last year. I mean, it's too bad that we were deprived of Texas and Texas A&M in the tournament last year because of a miracle shot by Northern Iowa.
And John T., part of the A&M fight song has the line, "Saw varsity's horns off." I mean, shouldn't they be? This is their fight song says to go after the Longhorns. What's going on here?
Sounds like a little premeditated something to me.
But John T., let me stick with you here for another game that's in your backyard here. Maryland and Duke had become in the final years in Maryland, last probably 10 years or so of Maryland in the ACC, as good of a rivalry as Duke Carolina, at least in my opinion. Just some of the amazing games they played. Is there any chance these teams are going to start playing again?
Possible. I'd say doubtful for the time being. Once Coach K leaves, if he ever leaves, like who knows what the new regime would want. One of the only Final Fours, I think the only Final Four I've ever been to is 2001 when Arizona lost to Duke in the title game here. But one of the semis was Maryland and Duke, and it was this amazing game where earlier in the season, Maryland is in a 10-point lead with like a minute left, and Duke had come back to pull off the upset in overtime. And in that game, I believe Maryland was up like 22 in the first half, and Duke came back to beat them. It was unbelievable to sit there and watch one team choke, collapse, whatever you want to call it, while another team with a ton of future first-round picks was able to just keep coming back and win a game. It was unbelievable.
Well,
yeah, out of the way quick is like all of these conference moves, Maryland leaving the ACC still seems to be the most ridiculous. Like that was their natural home, all the rivalries and that, and I still think kind of a fish out of water in the Big Ten.
Well, here's another crazy thing about Maryland. They won the national championship in 2002, which was their first and also their second Final Four. But I think a lot of their fans actually put a lot more stock into beating Duke in the 2004 ACC championship because that's how much that rivalry got heated at that point in time.
Well, can I ask this to you, David? Let me ask you this that ESPN controls the scheduling of the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Yeah.
Why aren't they scheduling Duke Maryland? Just forcing their hand on it.
They really should. I don't want to accuse Duke of playing nothing but cupcakes, but they don't play home and homes. And even when they do, it's in an NBA arena, like they'll play Temple but not on campus, or they'll play St. John's but not on campus. I think the last true home and home they scheduled was 2009. And as this was ending, Mike Krzyzewski said, we're not going to play Maryland on equal terms unless it's the Big Ten ACC Challenge. And you look at it, they don't play anybody. Like they play bye games and they play showcase games in NBA arenas that are on neutral sites, and that's all they play. I really miss this one. I know Duke, North Carolina is the signature showcase gold standard rivalry of rivalries, but Duke and North Carolina was not as bitter as Duke and Maryland. The hatred, the heat, the temperature of this rivalry was unbelievable. And I really miss it. And if it came back as an out-of-conference game, would it be the same? Probably not. But, hell, it would be better than just about any other out-of-conference game. I don't know why they don't do it for the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Continuing on with the list, though, I want to get through the rest of these games. We already mentioned the BYU-Utah game. It will be back after this season, just a one-year hiatus there. But one game that has not come back, and John T., let me bring you back in on this one here. West Virginia and Pittsburgh, the backyard brawl. It was great football rivalry, but another game here that absolutely should be played non-conference.
Couldn't agree more. It's a great historic rivalry with the geography and big teams, major conferences, legendary coaches, great players. I'm all for it.
And Bob Huggins is the type of guy who'll go play anybody here, really. While Pittsburgh puts together a bunch of cupcakes in their out-of-conference schedule. Now, maybe this changes under Kevin Stallings now, but they haven't scheduled at least for this year.
I'm hopeful that the football game is coming back. This was getting pretty nasty, maybe not so much on the court, but in the stands. And I think Pittsburgh just said that once they weren't in the same conference that was enough. But same with BYU, Utah. I don't like that Utah wanted to stop the series. I'm glad that they're bringing it back. You don't want to see violence, but you would like to see the series I'm a believer that you can keep series like this going and just have a little more security and keep people under control because, God, are these games fun.
It's funny that you mentioned Bob Huggins in West Virginia. Let's not forget that West Virginia and Marshall still play like annually on I think a neutral floor in Charleston. But what's funny a couple of years ago was that Marshall was trying to get West Virginia to play him twice, and then Bob Huggins was finally forced to smack them down on his radio show because they were getting a little greedy about the one-sided rivalry.
Yeah.
Well, John Hess, let me stick with you for a second here. Again, in your backyard with Cincinnati and Ohio State, and I believe that that Mick Cronin's willing to play these games, but it's come down to Ohio State saying no, we're not interested. And really, if you look at Ohio State's schedule, they'll rarely play anybody at all from the state of Ohio in the regular season. Do you have any reasons? Do you know any real reasons why this is not happening?
There was one season, I want to say 2006 and 2007, where they did play on a neutral floor in Indianapolis. But this was also when Cincinnati was at its low point after Bob Huggins was fired and Andy Kennedy was not kept on at Cincinnati. This was when Mick Cronin was in his first season. Today, I consider myself.
Yeah, we're getting a little feedback here.
We got it.
Yeah, John, if we're going to mute you for a second here while you're not talking. John T. All right. David, on the Cincinnati, Ohio State issue, though, that 06 matchup that Stalika mentioned, that was the only time since 1921 that they played in during the regular season.
Yeah, and that's outrageous. I mean, how do you go, what is that, 86 years, and you play each other once during the regular season, and you don't even play it in Ohio? And these are good basketball programs. They're schools that take basketball seriously, but if you look at both teams in November and December, they play an abundance of bye games in front of half-empty arenas. This game would sell out. And I think it would certainly be one of the biggest rivalries in the state, and it would be one of the premier out-of-conference rivalries in the country if these two got together. Why don't they play? And it's just the narrative is, if you believe it, that it's just Ohio State won't play it. Like they're not going to play Cincinnati. According to Mick Cronin, he's had friends that coached at Ohio State, and they've been told not to play Cincinnati.
1961 and 1962 are why Ohio State will not play Cincinnati. That was the NCAA championship game in both years, both overtime games, both won by Cincinnati.
Well, but John, let me bring Matt back in on this as well. It's not really just that with Ohio State. They don't play Xavier. They won't play Dayton. They don't even play Bowling Green or Ohio U or Toledo or Cleveland State. They just won't play anybody from their own state.
I remember looking at their schedule a couple of years ago. They didn't play anyone good, so anyone from their state would have been a massive upgrade. Now,
yeah, Xavier, another good program, and we mentioned them in another rivalry. I think they've played twice since 1935. Is that right?
That's or is it the numbers I have, yeah.
Yeah.
But in Xavier's defense, though, at least they try to get games on their non-conference schedule. Because this year, for example, they have Utah, they have Colorado, they have Baylor.
Xavier would play Ohio State in a second, and I think they're going to resume the Dayton game as soon as one or both of the coaches leaves. Xavier's not afraid to play teams. They would play Ohio State. It's Ohio State that doesn't want to play.
Let me have a doubleheader: Xavier, Dayton, Cincinnati, Ohio State, and
yeah.
Let me bring John T back in on this here. On another matchup, actually. Yeah, if we can get you unmuted here, John, in a second. But Kentucky and Indiana, after one of the best games of the 2012 season, the year that Kentucky won the national championship, Indiana beat them, promptly canceled the rivalry that had been going on since, I believe, 1969 or so. Although they did play last year in the NCAA tournament. Is John Calipari afraid to go to Indiana anymore? Is that what's going on here?
Yikes. I don't think John Calipari is afraid of too much in this world, so my gut says no. Again, another great thing with history and tradition and great games and great coaches and players. I'm all for geography, if only from a fan standpoint. One of the greatest games I went to last year was GW beating Virginia at GW. Tiny little gym, half full of Virginia fans. I don't know if they came up from Charlottesville or lived in the D.C. metro area, but the chance to have your fans go on the road to see you play and root you on and cheer. It's a great experience. I wish more teams would do that. I mean, in Philly, they do a very good job. Penn plays all the other schools like Temple and Villanova, St. Joe's, et cetera, et cetera. I'm all for it. The more the merrier, if only to give the fans a chance to go see their team. You can't always get a ticket at home if your home team sells out. It's nice to be able to go on the road and get to watch your team.
Great point.
And they were going to play this, like one of the options was playing it in the football stadium in Indianapolis, where you could fit both Rupp Arena and, oh my God, I'm blanking, Indiana's historic Assembly Hall. I said Assembly Hall. It was big enough to fit them both in there. So why not? I mean, why would you pass up an opportunity to play a game like that? It makes no sense. And
well,
they
I think
played
this
every
is the case.
Yeah, they played every year.
Creed wants it home at home, and Calipari wants it neutral court, and neither are budging.
Right. Well done, coaches. Thank you very much.
Matt, let me stick with you a second. One other matchup on this list here. I think this is our last one. Kansas and Wichita, teams that did meet. Did meet during the NCAA tournament recently as well. Have still not been able to find a way to schedule that. I think Kansas tries to claim that they don't have a room left on the schedule for this game. Is this a game they should be making room for?
I'd say as Wichita is now, yeah, because Kansas plays tough schedules. Self doesn't dodge anyone. So I would say that. But now I think I would add some room for it, at least while Greg Marshall has Wichita going as he does. And then if 3-4 years down the road, Marshall takes a different job, Wichita falls back again, then maybe you take it off. But I'd say, yeah, like, at least do a home and home, and if not, maybe like a 4-year.
Yeah.
There is a team called Creighton that would also love to get Wichita State back on their schedule because people forget how heated that rivalry got towards the end of Creighton's days in the Missouri Valley.
Right, and I'm glad John said that because that is another great game. I mean, those are two big fan bases, and that was a heated rivalry, and they haven't played, and I think they should. Oh, the one thing, you can't pick on Kansas because every year they routinely play the hardest out-of-conference schedule, or if it's not the hardest, it's one of the top 2 or 3 or 5. But the one thing they don't play is anything that could be construed as an out-of-conference rivalry. They'll play showcase games. They'll play Michigan State, Kentucky. They'll play the big games, and they'll play the neutral floor games, and they'll go on the road, but they won't play Wichita, and there's another team they won't play.
Actually, that does complete the entire list here, David.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's it. I think we went through all of them. You want to just double check it. So I'm going to move on to our final thoughts for the.
No, it doesn't.
I'm sorry. Yes, Kansas versus Missouri. David, I seem to have had audio problems with you right now, though. So, John T., Kansas, Missouri. On a serious note here, Kansas seems to have no interest since Missouri left to the SEC. Is there any way this rivalry comes back outside of Hillary Clinton and her running mate getting elected?
I'm not too familiar with this rivalry. Can you tell me a little more about it?
But seriously, John S., I think we really have lost David. I guess he just.
I think he's reaching for the middle finger, so we better be careful about muting him for too long.
But these are two teams that the football rivalry that dates all the way back to 1891, 1907 in basketball, and now they don't play anymore, John.
And that was only a generation after the Civil War had ended, at least when the football rivalry began. Because people also forget, I think it was 2008 or 2009 where both Kansas and Missouri football were in the top 5, and Kansas, even though they lost, actually went to the BCS, got to play in the Orange Bowl, and Missouri got the Booby Prize, wound up getting the #1 ranking, lost in the Big 12 title game, and ended up settling for the Cotton Bowl.
And this really was, just one of the great rivalries that was out there, though, really on a serious note. And Matt, they don't play in any sport at all, is my understanding, not even women's lacrosse.
Yeah, it's a shame because that's the border war. That was one of the games I would make a point of even. I know towards the end of it, Missouri wasn't any good. Now, I think the bottom's actually fallen out since then with Frank Haith putting his imprint on it and then the Kim Anderson hire turning out to be a spectacular failure.
Well, it would be a bit of an RPI poison game for them these days. I think that might be another factor. But I guess on that note, now that we lost David at probably the only time of the year that he wanted to speak to us. David, you're back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay. Well, David, we had a real nice discussion on Kansas, Missouri, but we wanted to move on to final thoughts here because I think that covers all our issues for the evening. And David, let me start with you. Any final thoughts for the night?
Okay, well, I'm glad we're moving on to this point of the show. We're going to spend like the next hour and a half talking about this, and that is bringing back the border war. It's got to come back.
Hold on.
One of the
Okay. Sorry, got the mute button on. Stalika, any final thoughts for the night?
I know we had mentioned some of the features about the website earlier, but I'm also going to go ahead and throw out the Throwback Thursday column, which will be coming back during the beginning of the regular season. This year, we're also going to go ahead and focus on a few past venues that have either closed within the past year or are going to close, like Allstate Arena in Chicago for DePaul. So keep an eye out for that every Thursday during the regular season.
That wonderful DePaul Arena and that great home court advantage. I can't wait for that. John T., any other final thoughts? I've got to get you unmuted here 1 second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm looking forward to opening night already on November 11th. The games that are on my radar, there's 3 tourney teams from smaller schools who are going on the road against an SEC team. Florida Gulf Coast against Florida, although it's in Jacksonville, so neutral site, quote unquote. Stephen F. Austin goes into Rupp Arena. Good luck with that. And Chattanooga, the Mocs head out to Thompson Bowling Arena to take on Tennessee. I can't wait to see these teams with tourney experience go against the big boys from the SEC to see how it all shakes out.
That's going to be a really good one, that Tennessee-Chattanooga game at least. Matt, let me. I know David's giving me a message right now, but Matt, your thoughts, final thoughts.
That's it. Excited to look forward to the year. I know people mentioned Butler, and that's, I think, a big team could go a couple of different ways. And that, like, I actually could see they're going to be close to that number 16 ranking because I absolutely love Keelan Martin. Putting him in a featured role, you still have Andrew Schrabbitz, and then you got GW transfer Keithan Savage coming in. So that. I know there's going to be a polarized team among the crew here, and probably even.
I think we froze there, but we'll get to this as we get into our preseason podcast. I'm not going to be agreeing with you on this Butler team when we get into the Big East. But my final thought, speaking of the Big East, is that we are once again going through this issue with the NCAA not clearing kids. We're 4 weeks into the semester already. There's no reason why the NCAA still doesn't know if a kid's passed certain courses or how he did in high school. And I'm talking specifically about Omari Spellman, incoming freshman for Villanova, who has a chance to be a real standout player for them. Still not cleared. They don't know at this point. We went through it last year with Chick Diallo from Kansas, who went 3 weeks into the season before he was cleared to play. I really think it's ridiculous that the NCAA takes so long to investigate these issues. Hopefully they'll at least get everything resolved before the start of the season this year. But David's really giving me a message here, so I guess that means that we've got only 1 second left till the show's over. Is that what it means? But I guess on that note, for myself, Matt, John T, John S, and the guy giving me the finger there, have a great evening, everybody. We'll talk to you again real soon.